Golden Mountain, by Mayor Levin, 1932, at Sacred Texts.com. The Golden Mountain. Marvelous tales of Rabbi Israel Baal Shem and of his great-grandson, Rabbi Nachman, retold from Hebrew, Yiddish and German sources. B.Y. Mayor Levin. Illustrated by Moritz Swart. New York, Behrman House Incorporated. Publishers. 1932. Click to enlarge 2 musicians. Click to enlarge front cover and spine. Click to enlarge end papers. Click to enlarge title page. Scanned, proofed and formatted at Sacred Texts.com by John Bruno Hare, February 2009. This text is in the public domain in the U.S. because its copyright was not renewed in a timely fashion. The Golden Mountain, by Mayor Levin, 1932, at Sacred Texts.com. Contents. Page. Forward. Page X. The Baal Shem Tov. Page 1. Before he was born. Page 3. Israel and the Enemy. Page 10. The Book of Mysteries. Page 17. The Secret Marriage. Page 27. The Bride in Her Grave. Page 45. Rabbi Israel and the Sorcerer. Page 58. 2 Souls. Page 71. The Standing Sheep. Page 85. The Mad Dancers. Page 86. Rabbi Israel and the Horse. Page 87. The Burning Tree. Page 92. The Water Spirit. Page 93. The Rich Man. Page 101. The Trial of Rabbi Gershon. Page 109. Rabbi Israel's Daughter. Page 113. Prayer. Page 114. Thrice He Laughed. Page 115. The Burning of the Torah. Page 125. The Boy's Song. Page 132. The Wandering in Heaven. Page 135. The Prophecy of the New Year. Page 138. The False Messiah. Page 146. The Holy Land. Page 153. His Torah. Page 163. After the Death. Page 165. The Book of Mysteries. Page 177. P.Y. Page. Rabbi Nachman of Bratlaw. Page 179. The Dynasty. Page 181. The Lost Princess. Page 190. The Broken Betrothal. Page 198. The Cripple. Page 213. The Bull and the Ram. Page 228. The Prince. Page 240. The Spider and the Fly. Page 248. The Rabbi's Son. Page 257. The Sage and the Simpleton. Page 266. The King's Son and the Servant's Son. Page 290. The Wind that Overturned the World. Page 309. The 7 Beggars. Page 333. The Golden Mountain, by Mayor Levin, 1932, at Sacred Texts.com. Illustrations. 2 musicians. Frontispiece. The Book of Mysteries. 23. The Peasant's Bride. 37. The Bride in Her Grave. 55. The Sorcerer. 63. Wedding. 83. Sabbath Meal. 123. Death. 164. The Tree of the Baal Shem Tov. 180. Wedding Feast. 211. Circumcision. 229. The Prince. 241. Cheddar. 259. The 7 Beggars. 335. The Golden Mountain, by Mayor Levin, 1932, at Sacred Texts.com. He is. Forward. 200 years ago, in a remote hut in the Carpathian Mountains, there lived a wonder worker named Rabbi Israel. Some now say that he never existed. The like has been said of King Arthur and of Jesus Christ. Their legends remain with us. Some say that Israel was never a rabbi, but rather an unlearned pedant who took authority unto himself. It is told that even as a child he deserted the village schoolroom to run into the woods where he learned the speech of animals and birds, of trees, stones, and flowers. A grown man, he knew all the secret mysteries of Kabbalah. But he refused to lead the stifled life of the synagogue scholar, turn his back upon the rabbinical bickerings and pinpoint disputes over minutiae of the law, and withdrew to the mountains, where he earned his livelihood as a lime burner, and where he would wander alone, sometimes for many days, absorbed in his strange reflections. When Israel came down from the mountains to Megivaz, it was to teach men to live with abounding joy, for joy in every living thing, he said, is the highest form of worship. The woods were holy, and the fields, every stone and blade of grass contained a spark of the living soul. Every act of living, breathing, eating, walking should be accomplished with fervor, joy, ecstasy, for every act spoke to God. Scholars who had passed their pale youth huddled over tomes of the law lifted their heads and for the first time saw the sky. He drew them out of the murky synagogue into the open fields. There, too, he said, God would hear them. P.S. He did not violate tradition. He enlarged it. He was observant of every point of the law, and he revered the house of prayer. But he said again that divinely simple truth that becomes lost in the ritual of every religion. He said that the full-hearted desire to worship was more important than the form or place of worship. Disciples gathered about him. Soon legends began to grow of the wondrous deeds and teachings of Rabbi Israel, and then he was called the Baal Shem Tov, which means the master of the wondrous name. By that name, he had the power to do miraculous deeds. He went from one end of the earth to the other in the space of a single night. He conquered the wild boars that the sorcerers set upon him. He pierced the iron wings that shrouded the earth from heaven. He drew the dead bride from her untimely grave. For 1,000 years the Jewish folk genius for the creation of myth had made no new body of legend. But now the genius that had made the unsurpassable tales of the Bible and the gem-like parables of the Talmud was turned back to its natural sources, and at once it began to weave the marvelous fabric of the legend of the Baal Shem Tov. He had stood in the marketplace, telling his fables to the entranced people who gathered about him while the rabbi of the town preached to an empty synagogue. In their huts of a Sabbath, his followers repeated the strange meaningful fables he had uttered, and told tales of the miraculous deeds he had done. Pilgrims came to Mejivas, and carried home with them the tales of the Baal Shem Tov. Soon his followers numbered in the hundreds, and they became Pizai, known as the Chassidim. The word Chassid implies intense piety, ardor, fervor, ecstasy. Despite the opposition of many noted rabbis, who accused him of ignorance, of wizardry, of Sabbath violation, the number of Israel's followers grew, for his teaching had that beauteous simplicity that goes directly to the hearts of the common folk. The secrets and delights of heaven were no longer reserved for the scholars who could pass all their days and nights in their house of study. The water carrier and the mule driver could gather around the long table in the hut of the master, and take part in the discussion. After several generations, the Chassidim numbered half the Jewry of Eastern Europe. They were governed by their tzaddikim, or exalted saints, to whom they came for decision on every conceivable occasion. If a merchant of Brody could not make up his mind whether or not to go to Lemberg to buy goods, he asked his tzaddik. If a housewife did not know whether or not an egg was pure, she asked her tzaddik. If a father did not know whether or not a certain match was suitable for his daughter, he asked his tzaddik. The power of the tzaddik was transmitted in his family, so that soon veritable dynasties of Chassidic rabbis were established. Soon, too, the decline of the movement set in, for many of the latter tzaddikim took advantage of their power, lived in pomp and luxury, and even sold the honor of being seated next to them at table. The meaning of Chassidism was lost. Pleasure took the place of joy, an orgy of ecstasy. There are still hundreds of thousands of Chassidim, many of them true to the original meaning of their PZ belief. And among them, true tzaddikim are to be found. But the last to attain the exaltation of the Baal Shem Tov was his own great-grandson, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. In him, the Chassidic legend had its fulfillment and its completion. Folk literature has two sources. The tales may grow imperceptibly as they pass among the people, each teller adding his words, until the image is complete. Or they may be made in entirety by one who is so completely within his folk as to speak with the voice of the entire people. The Chassidic legend is drawn from both these sources. The legends of the Baal Shem Tov have no single authorship. They were made partly from the Baal Shem sayings, partly by storytellers who went from town to town repeating the tales. One of the legends is concerned with what happened to such a storyteller. Later, the tales were written down, and to this day they are circulated by the hundreds of thousands in little penny storybooks printed in every city of Poland and Russia. Many generations of Jewish children had no other Arabian Nights than these Chassidic tales, whose glamorous adventures they absorbed while their parents discussed the deep meanings concealed in the same fables. At last scholars, philosophers, and literary men discovered the legends, and such masters as Israel Zangwill, Shalom Asch, S. Ansky, and the German poet-philosopher Martin Buber have made use of them. But the second part of the Chassidic legend is composed of the tales of a single author, Rabbi Nachman. Here the individual speaks as the folk, and we have P.G. a group of seeming fairy tales that are lucid and meaningful as the parables of Christ. Over the table on Sabbath Eve, or during long wagon journeys in the Galatian provinces, on walks, or when teaching his students, Rabbi Nachman would spin these marvelous illusions, in which kings and princes, heroes and demons move in colorful transparency, like majestic figures of a stained glass window set into speech and motion. Each tale is an intricate maze. The reader follows 7 different paths, only to find himself suddenly standing, bewildered and triumphant, at their common crossroads. The meaning is hidden and yet shining clear, for each person in each tale is a symbol as abstract as a numeral, and at the end, the symbols seem miraculously to have taken their places in the pure formula of a given theorem. There is the story of the king god who unwittingly sends his beloved daughter the Shekinah, glory of God, into the place of the evil one earth. Then he grieves at her loss until the Prince Israel of the Messiah goes out to find her. Twice he meets her but fails, through his own weakness, in delivering her from the palace of the evil one. Twice he must wait in the desert Egypt and Babylon. The third time he is sent wandering over the earth a present exile. But at last he comes to her in the palace of pearls upon the golden mount in the Holy Land. He remains there a long time, and then they return to the king, but how the return is effected, we do not know. This might be the place for an essay on Trisidic doctrine. I am no scholar, but merely another storyteller who, from a far land and through a strange tongue, has come upon a saga of his own people, and Ziv recognized it, and felt that he must tell it again. Trisidic doctrines have been explained, beautifully so, by Martin Buber, whose essays on Chassidism, together with his versions of some of these same tales, have recently been published in an English translation by Lucy Cohen. And yet it has seemed to me that an outline of doctrine would be superfluous as an introduction to these tales, for the tales themselves were used by the Trisidic rabbis to explain that very doctrine. Rabbi Nachman's fable of the princess lost in the palace of the evil one is an example of their magnificent clarity and beauty. For we may explain the Trisidic conception of the soul as embracing all things and beings on earth, for God sent his living glory, called the Shekinah, down to earth, and the sparks of living glory are in all things, the rocks, the trees, the grass of the field, the caterpillar, the eagle, and the lion, and in man. The soul of each thing and of each man is part of the universal soul, and at the awaited time, when Messiah comes, the sparks will flow together, and return to unite with God. The flaw is in man, and the evil one prevents his arriving at the time of perfection that will bring down Messiah. But is not all this told in Rabbi Nachman's tale? The evil one himself is part of universal glory, for he has known suffering. Then all that happens on earth, even evil, should be met with joy in the universality of the soul, for the descent is part of the rise, and sin is necessary to purity. But this, too, is beautifully made clear in the tale of Rabbi Israel, who as a boy held the twitching black heart of the enemy in his PXV hand, and would not destroy it, because he saw that it, too, suffered. And again, in Rabbi Nachman's tale of the prince who was made entirely of precious stones, but had to become a leper before his gem-like beauty was revealed. We may explain the Trisidic belief in the union of souls predestined for each other, but that is beautifully and dramatically told by Rabbi Israel in two souls. We may tell of the Trisidic conception of the voice of the soul, or the melody in each thing, but Rabbi Nachman's story of the king's son and the servant's son almost makes us hear that very melody. We may repeat the Trisidic principle that the form of worship is insignificant beside the emotion, but no abstract words can ever make that as clear as the tale of the shepherd who worships God by leaping back and forth over a brook. These are the imaginings of obscure rabbis who lived long ago in remote villages along the river Dniester and the river Bog, and yet the work of our modern men of intellect and sophistication does not go beyond their fundamentals conceptions, for no one can go beyond truth. The modern conception of time as non-existent, elaborated in Professor Einstein's formulae, is exquisitely stated in Rabbi Nachman's tale of the seven beggars. And so sophisticated an author as Professor Erskine bases his latest novel upon the fable of the man who was sent back from the gates of heaven to complete whatever good deeds or bad he had left unfinished on earth, for order is the universal key. And that, too, is part of Trisidic doctrine, and is told in the story of the Baal Shem and the little horse. PXVI. To my knowledge, this is the first attempt to tell the Trisidic legend in English. I have read the tales in many collections in Yiddish, Hebrew, and German. And I have tried to be merely another storyteller, receiving the legends from his forebearers, choosing of the many tellings of the same tales those that please him most, adding his own little turns and touches to the fables, and telling them again, but trying always to keep in them the spirit of the tale told in a warm heart to many eager hearers. In the more mystical portions of some of the stories of Rabbi Israel, the interpolations of Martin Buber have seemed so just as to become an integral part of the myth, and I have therefore followed closely his versions of Israel and the Enemy, the Book of Mysteries, the Wandering in Heaven, and the Prophecy of the New Year, and have used his story in combination with tales from other sources in the account of the Baal Shem's attempted voyage to Palestine. I have tried to put the scattered legends of the Baal Shem Tov together so as to form a legendary life story of Rabbi Israel, who was born in 1700 in Chizokip and died in 1760 in Chiznejivas. His great-grandson, who was born in Nejivas in 1772, and died in Uman in 1810, left 13 tales, which were written down by his pupil, Nathan. Of these, I have here translated 11. The other 2 are fragmentary and confused. Many of these tales I first heard from the lips of Maurice Zwark, of Lot and Paris, a true Chassid and a great artist. To him I am profoundly grateful. I wish also to thank the Jewish novelist, Shalom Ash. He. XVII. For the loan of his excellent collection of Chassidic literature. and to express my indebtedness to Leo Schwartz, of New York, for his scholarly aid, especially in relation to the Rabbi Nachman's sources. Meir Levin. New York, 1932. The Golden Mountain, by Meir Levin, 1932, at Sacred Texts. Com. P. 1. The Baal Shem Tov. Rabbi Israel, Master of the Holy Name. P. 2. P. 3. Before he was born. Here is the story of how Elijah came to God, and asked him to make Rabbi Elazar the father of Rabbi Israel. And the marvelous trials of Rabbi Elazar. When God was about to create Adam, a number of souls, knowing that all of the souls then living in heaven would share in the sin of created Adam, fled to a far place outside the boundaries of heaven, and hid themselves in a corner of chaos. There they waited until after the first sin was done. Only that band of hidden souls escaped the evil touch of Adam's sin. And they are the innocent souls. When the enemy becomes powerful on earth, and stretches mountains of black clouds between man's earth and heaven, when men become knotted with evil and lose their godly form, then the Almighty goes up to the highest of his regions, and seeks out one of his innocent souls. He says to the innocent soul, "Go down and purify the earth." Such were the souls of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. Such was the soul of Noah. Such were the souls of the great prophets, of the great scribes, and of the great rabbis. The soul of the Messiah is prince among this band of innocent souls. And when the time of redemption arrives, Messiah himself will come down from the highest of heavens. Then the enemy will disappear.